He clenches his right fist, followed by the left one. So I would like to thank author Oneal Walters for partnering with me. We are doing a mini-series on this channel talking about relationships. This is his thriller book called The Empty Couple. This book follows a young couple, Michael and Ruth, who seem to live an idyllic life. Nice house, expensive cars, and happy relationship. But when Michael loses his job, he turns to heavy drinking and becomes violent, leaving Ruth struggling to pay the bills and fearing how this living nightmare will end. It is very short, only about 104 pages, but it is chock full of lessons in relationships. For this video, we will be focusing primarily on romantic relationships. I am only going to be talking about scientifically supported information. I am not going to be sharing my own experiences or popular theories. This comes straight out of official academic magazines and textbooks. So let's go ahead and start analyzing this couple. And one of the most basic places to start for that is called Gottman's Four Horsemen. American psychologist John Gottman isolated 4 particular qualities that mean that a relationship is failing. Gottman's first is criticism. Now, we aren't talking about telling somebody something constructive, giving them advice. We're talking about criticism that tears down the fabric of a person's character. Not just their actions, but their character. Ruth steps back into the hallway, fear evident on her face. "I will want you to have clean clothes for next week," she stutters, raising one hand to cover the side of her face. Then she quickly adds, "so the clothes can be ready when you need them." "You can't do anything right," he yells. "Only a stupid woman would wash all my clothes at once." Michael is not just attacking the fact that she's washing all of his clothes at once. He is actually attacking who she is. Her intelligence, in particular because of the word stupid. It's definitely not just, "I didn't like what you did." It's, "I don't like who you are and you are defined by this mistake." That is a destructive form of criticism. Entering the hallway, Michael uses the wall for support. Turning left to the master bedroom, he stumbles in and yells, "Ah! Ah!" like a wounded beast. A piece of shattered glass has pierced his left foot, causing it to bleed. "Ruth, you jerk!" he roars. "You ungrateful jerk!" In both these instances, Michael is attacking who she is. Yes, he just stepped on a broken piece of plate. But nonetheless, the point here is that he is attacking who she is in the form of name-calling. Now, Gottman's second horseman is contempt. "There's no such thing as a good woman anymore," Michael says. Not only does it show that he doesn't really think highly of women or other people, but he's using that to attack Ruth and basically say that she is inferior. "You're trying to kill me," he bellows. "You didn't clean up." He walks past the area where the plate fell. His blood marks his path, his weight firmly pressed on his right foot. He travels towards Ruth's chest of drawers and grabs the first and second items on top, throwing them against the wall. Smash! "Please stop," Ruth begs. "I'm sorry, please. My mother gave me that vase as a present." Smash! Ruth jumps out of bed and faces him. She is 2 steps away from being in direct contact. "Why are you doing this to me?" she yells. "You're becoming a monster!" Almost hidden in the dark, he reaches over for her cell phone, exclaiming, "I'm the victim! I'm the one bleeding! If I'm a monster, you made me this way!" He grips her cell and raises his hand high, then brings it straight down like a roller coaster. Her cell phone falls and bounces off the floor in pieces. There are a lot of passages that show contempt, either explicitly or implicitly, throughout this book. He stepped on a shard of plate, and yes, that hurts. It's okay to be upset. It needs to be expressed in such a way that it does not undermine another person's valuables and their value as a person. which is exactly what contempt is. Michael is essentially indicating in his actions that his emotions, anything that he feels and he values, is above anything that could be valuable to her. She is inferior to him. She and her values mean far less than his values and his feelings. Even just feeling spur of the moment mean more than very long-term, deeply wrought feelings that she may have about these objects that he is destroying. Now, the third one is defensiveness. Do you want to start your own business? She asks, setting his glass next to him. He opens another beer bottle and his smile turns cold. I'm meeting people in blue, he answers, talking about jobs. Nothing's happening, doing all I can. You're lazy because you don't want to put in the effort, she replies. There's no such thing as a good woman anymore, he says. Unemployment rate is increasing for full-timers. The news is lying. I only see part-time jobs available. No entrepreneurs are starting new businesses. Daily, I see a lot of men facing unemployment. Students are taking simple jobs from May to September. Companies are not hiring full-timers. He gulps the beer and laughs at a joke on TV, totally ignoring her. While, yes, defensiveness can be submissive, Michael's form of defensiveness is usually aggressive, as you may have noticed. It's clear throughout the book that Michael has always been into drinking and always drank too much, but things have gotten completely out of control in their relationship ever since he lost his job. It's understandable that she would be upset, and he is clearly not trying. If he were really wanting to get another job and really wanting to sort things out with Ruth, he would go ahead and have this conversation and just tell her exactly what he's thinking and wanting, but he clearly does not want any part of that. He is simply giving excuses for not having a job. And coincidentally, it is also, I believe, a form of stonewalling, which is Gottman's fourth horseman. Ruth, I had a busy night. What is it? He asks. I have to leave soon. I bet you are wasting my time. He's not stonewalling in the form of completely cutting her out. He's still saying something, but as far as real communication, real expression of feelings, vulnerability that it takes to truly communicate and understand another human being, he has put up a wall. But his wall is usually a form of aggressiveness and yelling instead of just being silent, as some people will tend to stonewall. Gottman's four horsemen are extremely important to know. They signal whenever a relationship is going down a very bad path. Now, the trouble with the four horsemen is that by the time you see it, it's like detecting cancer really late in the game. Aren't there factors in a relationship that psychology gives us for knowing whether a relationship is at risk very early on or maybe from the beginning? Well, it turns out that psychology research actually does give us quite a lot to go off of. If couples have one or many of these risk factors, then it is far, far more likely that a divorce is coming down the road. Now, I need to stop us right here and say that correlation does not equal causation. These risk factors often predict that a marriage is going to fail, but that does not mean that these factors cause it to fail. Some of these risk factors are choices and you can do something about them, but some of them are not. Some are just terrible circumstances that really are out of your control, but there is still value in knowing where the risk lies. Even if you can't do something about every single one of these risk factors, it never hurts to know exactly where your score stands. And as we go through these risk factors, we're going to see how many of these factors exist in Michael and Ruth's situation in our book. Risk number 1, marrying too young, before the age of 21. Good. Ruth's employer smiles broadly. Any plans for marriage yet? No plans for marriage yet, sir. I mean Kevin. He and I won't be common law forever, though. Just have minor stuff to sort out and a new house. Kevin Christian's smile fades. Using his left and then right hand, he intensely wipes away white flakes that have settled on his dark blue suit. A beautiful woman like you should be off the market, Kevin advises. My wife and I often talk about how pretty you are. Ruth, take it from me. Don't wait too long to tell him how you really feel and what you need. Love, like life, must be a continuous progression. Let him know a 4-year wait is too long. I suppose this risk is null and void in the fact that our couple is not married at this time. A lot of training and a lot of time, a lot of education goes into being a lawyer. It is safe to say that she is above the age of 21, and probably Michael is too, also based on hints in the book. Risk number 2 is cohabiting or getting pregnant before marriage. This definitely applies to our young couple here. They are living together, but they are not married yet. Risk factor number 3 is at least one of the spouses grew up without a stable two-parent home. We are never actually given that much information in the book, so we don't really know what our couple has gone through. We don't really know anything about their parents. Risk number 4 is not dating for very long before marriage. Now, I really wish that the article that I found this information from had given a particular time. It was never exact on how long is long enough. Sadly, that one's hard to gauge. Now, our couple does not have this risk factor because obviously they've been together at least 4 years based upon the passage that I read last. Risk factor number 5 is not being well educated or one spouse having more education than the other. And generally, it is a bit harder whenever the woman is the one who has more education than the man has if there is a discrepancy between their education. I've been a mechanic for 10 years, Michael replies, still watching TV. John Peters is a decent employer. I was wrongly let go by his dumb son. He's a jerk, nothing like his father. Stop stressing me out. Michael is a mechanic, and obviously has been for quite some time. Now, it's never really explicitly given in the book how much education Ruth and Michael both have. Just going off the fact that Michael is a mechanic, mechanics generally have high school, maybe an associate's degree, perhaps maybe just some trade education. Ruth, however, is a successful lawyer. Now, I can tell you safely that lawyers require a lot of education. So if we are going to assume that Michael has just enough education to work as a mechanic, and Ruth is a lawyer and obviously needs all that education that is required to get to that point, there is a big discrepancy in Ruth and Michael's education history, Ruth being by far the more educated one. Education and jobs leads us to risk factor number 6, which is lack of a good job and stable income. Ruth's employer clears his throat. In your first year, you became a non-equity partner, he says. In your second year, your performance was excellent and you're currently a homeowner, eh? Good. Is there anything that I can do for you, Ruth? I offered you an assistant on 2 occasions. From this passage, we can see that Ruth has an excellent job. She has an employer who's very understanding and very attentive to her. And she works very hard in her job and is earning plenty of rewards there. We already know from past passages that Michael is currently unemployed and not really working the hardest at getting another job. Ruth stares at Michael. It's been 5 weeks. I can't handle all the bills. I need you, Michael. Can't you ask for your old job back? We can see here that while yes, Ruth does have a good job and it is no doubt a very handsome pay, it is not nearly enough to cover the current expenses, especially without Michael's help. Our struggling couple also has another strike against them on this one. Our 7th risk factor is living in a large town or city. We are never really given enough details to know how big of a place is where Michael and Ruth lived. Suburbs or urban areas, we don't really know. Risk factor number 8 is a very large age gap. Again, we are not actually given the age. There's implications that they are around in the same phase of life and they are about the same age. My guess is that they are probably not all that different in age, but we don't really know that. Our second to last risk factor, having faiths or spiritual beliefs that are very different from one another's. In the car, Ruth cries and prays, "Oh Lord, this weight is too much to bear. The heaviness of my pain is crushing my chest. Success at work feels like nothing is gained when my family is crippled with pain. Forgive me and conquer my enemy. Beer is my enemy, so separate us, Lord. Please don't let it defeat or destroy me, Lord. I fought enough. I can't fight anymore. Amen." This and many other times throughout the book shows that Ruth is a woman of faith. Michael picks up the Bible and throws it upward. Gravity grabs it and sends it crashing. The spine splits open on contact with the hardwood floor. Michael stands in the doorframe. Then he runs and holds her. She's warm. "Ruth! Ruth!" he yells. He looks at the split Bible near her. "Oh no, this can't be. Take me. I'm the worthless piece of... Have mercy on her! Ruth, wake up!" So we get mixed messages from these two passages. He will call upon God whenever he sees Ruth seems to be in danger, indicating he probably has some kind of belief in him somewhere. But at the same time, whenever he was not perceiving any type of danger, he actually destroys Ruth's Bible. But whether or not you're truly devoted to the faith, I feel like that is far more exemplified in the fact that whenever things were going okay, he was willing to trash what many people consider a sacred book. Michael and Ruth share probably a common foundation at the most basic level as far as spiritual beliefs. Ruth actually has what people would call intrinsic religion, whereas Michael would have what's called extrinsic religion, which is actually not a very good form of faith to have. Now, if you don't know what these terms mean, I'm going to direct you to a video that I made on what psychology says about these different types of religion, so I find it debatable how matched they really are in their spiritual or religious beliefs. And the very last risk factor given is having no religious beliefs upon which the marriage is founded. Unfortunately, the source of this information did not actually say what it means to have a relationship built upon religious beliefs, like what exactly that means. But what we do know is, as we just read, Ruth and Michael, to varying extents, call upon God for help. But it's really not clear how much of their decision-making is founded upon religious principles. So based on these risk factors that psychologists have found, we can see that our young couple has several. What does psychology say about making a relationship healthier? Just cheering on your spouse. Even in the little things, you are proud of them and you support them. Don't expect a perfect spouse. If you go around wanting your spouse to be 100% of what you're looking for, you will always be disappointed in them. If your spouse meets 80% of the qualifications that you really want, that is a golden number, guys. That is excellent. That does not mean that you don't have to work things out and be honest and be vulnerable and be upfront. That is valuable in and of itself. What it does mean is focus on that 80% that they give you and not the 20% that they don't. And how many couples do this? Do not try to keep the score even. You do not have to compete for who had a harder day, who has the bigger headache, who has the worst job, yada yada yada. It's not saying that you should not confide in your spouse. Whenever your spouse comes up to you and says, "Oh, I just had the worst day," you don't go,
"Oh, you think you had a hard day? Let me tell you what a hard day was. This was my hard day. Oh, cannot compete with me on that."
No. If they had a hard day and you had a hard day, you both had a hard day. Talk about it. It is wonderful to have a spouse that will cheer you up, and I really hope that they do that for you. In a good relationship, they will. Studies do show that whenever you cheer somebody else up, then you actually also get this big boost of happiness by cheering them up. Take the first step, take the initiative. And whenever they see you taking the initiative, they are more likely to take initiative themselves in cheering you up. Start a positive feedback loop of cheering each other up. Just take the first step. Trust me. If it's a habit for them to always talk about themselves, that can be addressed whenever tempers aren't high and things are calm. Again, this sounds like a no-brainer, but have sex with your spouse. This will obviously help you to defend against affairs, but it's not just about the act, it's about really communicating the fact that you still want your spouse. This principle of showing your spouse that you really want them doesn't just apply to sex. If there's a better way to communicate that for your particular spouse, then go ahead and do that. Now, this sounds counterintuitive because it seems like it's making this too much of an option, but I'll explain. The last tip on divorce-proofing your marriage is admitting that divorce can happen. As I said, sounds counterintuitive, but the reason why that really works is because you tend to take care of stuff and not take for granted things that you know you can lose. If you realize that you can lose your spouse, your marriage could dissolve, then you're less likely to take your spouse for granted, so much more likely to operate from the standpoint of respect. Give your spouse the value that he or she deserves. Now, those are all excellent tips for what you can put into a marriage to make it last. But what do you have a right to expect from your spouse? What is it that you have a right to in this relationship? A lot of people struggle to know whenever they're demanding too much or whether they have right to ask for whatever it is that they're looking for. Here are 7 things that you should rightfully expect in a healthy marriage from your spouse. Number 1, you have a right to a spouse who is going to try to work out differences. Now, even the most compatible spouse is going to have differences, and you have a right to honesty and openness in working these things out. No relationship is going to thrive whenever you're not given any kind of expression of your emotions and your thoughts. Things like that do not stay hidden long, even if your spouse just knows about it via passive-aggressive remarks that you make. That is not what we are going for here. That is not going to help. You want to be honest and vulnerable, and the sooner the better. And if you want to know more about vulnerability, I have linked a really good video on vulnerability down below. I highly recommend it. Do not just assume that there's no solution for something. Even something that can't necessarily be worked out, there is at least value in coming to terms with it, getting it out in the open and saying, okay,
we're going to agree to disagree.
There's a lot of value just in having talked about it. Obviously, you may have to take some steps to minimize a disagreement, especially a very practical disagreement on decision making and how things are going to operate around the house. But there's always something that can be done to minimize the amount of tension that that disagreement causes. And always, always validate and respect your spouse's feelings and ideas. It doesn't mean you have to agree or accept them as your own. You just have to say,
okay, I know that you disagree with me on this, but you're allowed to disagree, and I still love you, and I still respect you.
Disagreeing is no excuse to be disagreeable. Conflict resolution, I know, is a hard thing. I'm not going to get into it on this video, but I actually did make a video on conflict resolution quite a while ago. It's all scientific stuff. It all came directly from academic sources. I hope it helps. You have the right to your spouse's attention. Attention in a marriage is so important, and it drastically improves the satisfaction in a relationship. So many studies show that good conversation and activities enjoyed together improves the happiness of both spouses and makes divorce far less likely. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be huge chunks of time. It could just be a peck on the cheek or buying your spouse a coffee unexpectedly. Small gestures go a long way. You can rightfully expect your spouse to share the load. This really improves feelings of fairness and teamwork in a marriage. And it's not even about dividing the labor 50-50. It's about doing what feels fair to both spouses. Being fair to both parties is the key point to take home here. In your marriage, you have the right to honesty about sex. This may surprise you, but happiness in a marriage actually does not hinge upon how much sex or pleasure from sex is there. What actually makes a difference is both spouses' expectations about sex being met. You can still have different ideas about what you want, but you just have to compromise and take turns meeting each other's needs in this department. You have the right to expect affection. Just hearing "I love you" and just having your spouse hold your hand or lay their head on your shoulder. These little things actually predict marital happiness for both partners. And studies show that it increases oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone, and helps manage stress better. So, yeah, more affection. Now, it is okay to ask for affection. Just relaxing together is a nice, easy activity. Even planned affection is more than enough. Doesn't necessarily have to be spontaneous to be meaningful. One stipulation, though, make sure that they know what it is that means a lot to you, and ask them what means a lot to them. If your spouse makes you breakfast in bed, what you really want is to just have long walks together along the beach or something like that. Understanding how each other communicate affection and want to receive affection is important. You have the right to gratitude. Gratitude is so important, guys. Even just one spouse initiating the cycle will often spark the other spouse to start appreciating the other one more. You can always take the first step in initiating this gratitude cycle. You can say something like,
"Thank you for filling up the gas tank."
but you can actually take it one step farther by letting them know that you appreciate not only what they did, but who they are.
"You are so considerate for filling up the gas tank. I know that you really don't even like doing it, but you did it for me and you are so sweet for doing that. Thank you."
You see how it takes it up a notch? But I have to warn you about this one. Do not use gratitude to cover up things that shouldn't even be happening in a relationship, and you would be surprised how many people do that.
"Hey, thanks for not hitting me today."
That's sick to think that even happens at all. If that's what you're thankful for, there's a serious problem beyond just you need to be more grateful to them. You have seriously got to rethink the relationship. I don't say that lightly, but if there's abuse going on, you definitely need to find some sort of help in some form soon. And lastly, you have the right to the benefit of the doubt. Now, this might sound a little bit delusional in a way, but studies show that whenever you give benefit of the doubt to your spouse, then your marital happiness is likely to be higher. You need rose-colored glasses for this. You need to put those on. They will make you more forgiving and help you solve problems together. It is so unhealthy to keep this really strict list of rights and wrongs. This may require you to do is to emotionally distance yourself from something that has upset you and to really think it through like a third party would. So whenever your spouse forgets to bring home that so desperately needed gallon of milk, what this means is not automatically going,
"Oh my goodness, why did I marry this person? They are a rude ignoramus."
no. Giving them the benefit of the doubt means you don't jump to the conclusion that there's some kind of problem inherent in that person's character. It's just maybe saying,
"I don't know why they forgot that this time. Maybe they had a hard day at work."
and just being gentler with them. And another warning, do not use this to cover up perpetual bad behavior, dangerous behavior, patterns that obviously are affecting the relationship time and time and time again. Or if you have really good indication that they purposely did something to hurt you, that is something that you should not cover up and put under the rug. Benefit of the doubt needs to be applied for small accidental slights. Everybody's going to inflict upon someone at some point. Everything clear? Clear? We good? So let's get back to our struggling young couple. We've gone over tips for divorce-proofing a marriage and the most basic rights that you can expect from a healthy marriage. The risk factors that they have, Gottman's 4 horsemen present in their relationship. Knowing what we know now, is it possible to save this young couple? Well, there is a lot more to Ruth and Michael, but that is the topic of the next video. I wish all of you nothing less than the very best relationship that you can have. Bye, guys! Mwah.